Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
What's up, everybody? My name is Zico, and this is Tarek. We are hosting the Two Flakes podcast, where we're going to be talking about a lot of different topics: life, upbringing, Islamic psychology, change, growth, and anything in between. We're excited to talk about these topics because, as young men, we feel like we're faced with the challenges of the dunya and the world and practicing our faith at a higher level and a deeper spiritual connection with Allah. And we just hope through these conversations that we can try to pass off some wisdom, dive deeper into different topics that might come up, and show you guys some different perspectives on the way that we think. So um, I'd like to pass it off to you, Tariq, and tell us a little bit about yourself
Yeah,
and
well
yeah,
said,
what we're
man.
doing here.
Great intro. Yeah. Um, so yeah, man, this is just meant to be like a space where we're just, raw and unfiltered, just kind of like saying it how it is for the both of us in terms of where we are in our journeys. And hopefully that could like benefit some people out there. Um, so yeah, my name's Tariq. I'm an Egyptian American, born and raised in Pennsylvania. Grew up there my whole life until I was like 20 years old. Um, had a bit of an identity crisis in middle school, high school, and then went to college at Penn State, like the full 20 years, right? Um, and yeah, after that, it was kind of like departing from the homeland, traveling a little bit, trying to figure out who I am, things like that. But yeah, man, being a townie was a little bit interesting. It was kind of sheltering, actually. Um, Sheltering in so many different ways, right? But we can probably get into that later. Right now, I'm doing some therapy work. I'm a quote unquote Islamic psychotherapist for Khalil Center and also for a private practice here in Maryland. So that's sort of what I'm doing now for profession. In terms of aspirations, that's a whole different topic, right? TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, breath stuff that you put me on, Zico, Qigong, started that recently. Volleyball, whole bunch of stuff, right?
Mm.
That's where I'm at right now. What about
Nice,
you, my guy?
nice. Absolutely, yeah. For me, I quit my job about 6 months ago, got out of corporate, and that has been a major milestone for me in my life. Just coming out of that and what's been happening in the last 6 months of just kind of deprogramming, unwinding, unpacking of all that has been kind of blocked inside. So this period of time for me is just very much focused on that. But like you, born and raised in State College, Pennsylvania, uh, Penn State alum, touting my whole life, and just navigating the challenges of growing up as a Muslim in America and as a person who was trying to discover what exactly Islam is and how it relates to me in my life and my actions on a daily basis and what I want to do in my life. It took me into the realm of psychology naturally and just made me ask all the difficult questions, the tough questions, the deep questions, and just have had a desire to want to answer those questions and find out more about myself, my relation to the world, how I think, how we as a collective think, and kind of like the human consciousness and the Islamic psyche coming together. And so now I'm in Jordan studying Arabic,
Mm,
and yeah, just been going at that for about 6 months now, and just really trying to learn the language. It's part of my identity as well. That's always been kind of this back and forth where
yeah,
I wasn't an Arabic speaker growing up, but now trying to incorporate it into my life and my future, and seeing where that will go, and seeing
yeah,
where that will take me. Obviously, I have a strong interest in the Islamic psychology world and somatic therapy. I got trained in somatic therapy, as well as going through my own somatic experience and really connecting with the breath and how the breath works with the body, releasing trauma and overcoming trauma, and all topics that I never really was aware of growing up. And I think that's part of the reason why we're doing this, and I wanted to do this, is because um, therapy is just so powerful.
Yeah.
It's tremendously helped me see different perspective on life and on spirituality and healing. I feel like those two words uh, really go together, and because we know the true healing really comes from God,
Mm.
and that is where the idea of healing is spiritual.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, yeah, that's a little bit about myself and where I'm at. And I'm sure we're gonna dive into more of that.
Oh
We
yeah.
hope through this that we can be both vulnerable and informative,
Hmm.
and share with you all some of our experience, that you all would benefit from it, and that people would benefit from it, and that you know we can raise all of our awareness by doing so.
Yeah. 100%. No, for sure. Yeah, we grew up in the same town, right? But
That's a
we weren't really like acquainted with each other until maybe college,
I'll say it's college.
right?
Yeah.
Like I knew that you were there, you know? You and I think two other people. I think we were like maybe like four or five Muslims in like high school, middle school, high
Mm,
school. But like I don't know, we were just like we never really like connected like this until like post grad, college,
mm.
after college.
Yeah, subhanAllah. No, yeah, we had a couple times where we like I would say like our the depth of our relationship was teased, I guess, if
Mm,
there's not a better word for that. But it was, yeah, after college. Yeah, just I don't know how to put a story on it, but I think it's one of those ideas of not putting the story on it, and just like, yeah, it just happened naturally, and it just really developed and came together, and just like interests and like mindedness, which came together, and uh, coming to the name of this channel, hopefully if it sticks, is
mm,
like temperament,
mhm.
and something that I had to discover for myself, and what the heck is a temperament, and why
Yeah,
is it important, which is yeah, like that winter temperament, and understanding parts of myself and why I'm that way. And
it's an interesting word because up until when I actually figured out what the word meant, like the technical definition, I just thought it was a synonym for like personality, character, disposition. Maybe it was one of those words, right? But temperament is actually like something so much deeper than that, and it relates to, if I'm not mistaken, because Zico, you've done a lot more, you know, research and reading into this, and you work directly with these things to some degree with your breath coach uh, sort of program. But temperament relates to the humoral theory structure of the human psyche, right? Where there are four different temperaments that kind of like correspond to four different seasons, right? So you have summer, which is choleric. You have uh, spring, which is sanguine. You have fall, which is melancholic, I believe. And then you have winter, which is phlegmatic. And I mean that's partly why we named the podcast Two Flags, right? It's because we're
yeah.
two phlegmatics. But like, what does that mean? What
Mm,
does phlegmatic mean? Like phlegmatic winter. Okay, we know that, but like, what does that mean?
yeah, absolutely. I think you know at least for me, right, growing up, we hear a lot in school and with other people in pop culture, like the zodiac signs or something like that. And so I never really aligned with that type of thinking, because I always
Yeah.
thought it was like little bit wishy-washy, but as you kind of witness and understand the temperaments and how the seasons are real, right? When you know it's cold and wet outside, that's real, as opposed to in the summer when it's just hot and dry. And so that's kind of a little insight into these temperaments and how we embody essentially aspects of that. And also our lives embody all of them in some cases, where children are really born into that happy-go-lucky, that blossoming spring-like nature where there's a lot of moisture and there's warmth, and the child's always, having that bubbly smile, or that's the overall energy. It's not to say that the child can't cry and kind of go into that state as well, but then we develop into more of that summer, where in the teenage years, where the confidence is very high and everything is moving upwards, just like a fire, which is hot and dry in its sense. But if somebody can put some water on their fire and allow the coals to become their nature, which is still from that choleric nature, they find that balance. And so understanding your temperament helps you understand how you can become more balanced throughout the year, as opposed to going into seasonal depression, which most people face every year with winter. And even in some of the warmer parts of the world, or like, let's say the United States, the South or the West Coast, people still have those seasonal rhythms. From us from the Northeast, we go to Florida in the winter and it's summer for us, but for them, it's still like a winter-like nature. So, and I think that's important, one, for understanding yourself and your healing journey, whether you do any types of therapy, somatic therapies. It's important to understand your temperament, which will help you understand your nature, what's normal for you, what could you fall into, what traps could you fall into. And this really also, of course, relates with the ego and the mind, and the ego's ability to fragment, or its ability to kind of ground and spiritualize. So that's a little bit about temperaments and how we work with them, I guess. Have you found, like, in your model of training with the psyche, temperaments come into treating and working with patients?
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't really like operate from that perspective as fully as I would like to. And that's partly because I don't really know as much of it as I would want. That would allow me to like work from that place. But I definitely do see it in patients. Like you can when you're just sitting with somebody, like you can tell whether they are like this kind of bubbly persona that corresponds to spring and hence sanguine personality, or if they're kind of like inward, they're kind of crouched a little bit, right? Analytical, maybe they're more melancholic or phlegmatic. But yeah, like you definitely see it, right? Like if somebody like understands the temperaments, like they can almost easily identify it in other people. So like that's something that like I really want to do more of, and that's actually something that is sort of like taking me to this TCM journey, because I want to understand this at like a deeper, fundamental, systematic level, right? Because there's like a whole structure to this thing. It's not simply just like, oh, like if you're smiley, you're probably sanguine, right? There's like it corresponds to so much between what you eat, your posture, the tone of your voice, right? When you feel like you have more energy versus when you feel like you have less energy, right? The time of day, the season, the time of year, right? All of these things like sort of work in with each other, and they like affect your like how you move and how you operate in the world. So that I think that's like freaking amazing, first of all. Um, and it definitely seems like a lot more rigorous and a lot more sophisticated than any like Western model that I've been operating from. Even though it's not
Mm.
really like to bash the West in terms of like what they've come up with interventions and modalities and things like that, because that can obviously be helpful in things like trauma and things like OCD or getting over chronic impulses or something like that. Like there's a lot of good that comes from Western models, right? But when it comes to like understanding the whole person, the whole psyche, their whole world, I don't know, man. That's something that like only the East has done a really good job at, you know.
Mm.
Um, but yeah,
Mm.
I'm on this journey now to like finding out more about that. Like I'm
Mm.
like I want to know the whole thing. I don't want to just know the cognitive side or the emotional side, right? Like I want to know the whole thing.
Yeah,
So
and I think that really touches into just holistic, the holistic approach, and
yeah,
whether it is to being a practitioner or just being a person and just taking a holistic approach to life. I mean, when I was teaching in the weekend school in New Jersey, a lot of kids just are really trying to grasp and struggle with this idea of capitalist America. And now that our generation has been exposed to the whole world and gets to
yeah,
see the whole world and the way that everybody lives across the globe, they've come to question how am I living here in the West
mm,
as a Muslim youth or as a young person who maybe my parents only saw one thing, but now I see so much. And this word holistic keeps coming up. And oh, maybe a holistic life or a work life balance. And what does that look like? I guess, what was the first time you were exposed to maybe like the word holistic? And how do you feel like it affects your life now?
yeah. That's like a pretty recent word, isn't it?
Mm.
Like I feel like I definitely think that like when we talk about like the four temperaments or traditional Chinese medicine or like Unani Tib, maybe that's something that we can get to in the future. Like these models definitely see holistically and they have a holistic framework for things, right? But in terms of like the West, like the word holistic, I don't know. I think the first time I heard that was probably in like uh it wasn't even in college because I remember I only took one psychology course in undergrad and I did not hear the word holistic at all. It was just kind of
Mm.
like John Bowlby, Freud, Carl Jung, right? Um, all of these just like name brand Western
Mm.
uh, psychologists. But I didn't hear the word holistic until probably graduate school, to be honest with you.
Wow.
Yeah, that was maybe like 2021, 2022. Um, but yeah, and even then, like it was just a plastic word, I think.
Mm.
I think and perhaps the way that we can define plastic word is like, a word that has all connotation and no denotation. Like it's a word that just like sounds like, oh yeah, like we operate from a holistic perspective. Like we want the whole person, right? But then it's like, what does that actually mean and what does that actually look like, right?
Mm.
For the most part, what I saw is that people were using this word, but continuing to operate from a very reductionist place of like, oh, the human being as in just their thoughts, the human being as in just their feelings, right? But
Mm.
not the human being as in their thoughts, their feelings, their behavioral inclinations, their spiritual inclinations, the food that they eat, their temperaments, right? When they feel most active, when they feel most depleted, you know, um, how the time of day affects the individual. Like that to me is holistic, right?
Mm.
But the people who usually use that word in a Western space, like, don't mean any of that at all. It's just kind
Mm.
of like a catch phrase, right? Oh, they're
Mm.
holistic, so they must be better than the everyday doctor who just wants to prescribe me,
Mm.
Adderall or something like that, right? But I don't see it. Like I hear it a lot nowadays, but I don't see any of it. To be quite frank with you,
Mm.
what has that been your experience? You think?
I think the first time I heard the word holistic was whenever I was applying for medical school and I was considering DO schools as opposed
Yeah,
to MD schools and really hearing the word holistic. Like,
yeah,
oh, this could be right up your alley since you're more holistic as a person, so you should consider DO. I think hearing what you had to say about it, it really sounds like at the end of the day, there's an environmental influence that
yeah.
has to be overcome to actually achieve a type of holistic lifestyle or holistic practice or approach. Um, because it's like you're just fighting against the current.
Mm,
And um, at a certain point, you gotta like step out of the water and just walk on the bank, of the
yeah,
river,
yeah.
and or at least take some time outside of the river to observe. All right, like, and I think it's almost like that first step of awareness is like getting out of the river and just sitting and be like, the water is going that way. Why am I trying to swim this way?
Mm,
And that's where I really like the temperaments, right? And it helps me to basically move with the stream and um, allow on the way things to come up and to change as opposed to just fighting the tide. And I think there's a lot of layers to the
yeah,
self, right?
yeah.
Of course, you know this working with people, but uh, yeah, it's complex. And I feel for me a lot of times it was like the stress versus rest, right?
Mm,
Coming to find rest and accepting stress, and not looking at either one as not necessarily like better or good or evil.
mm,
Um,
mm.
and you know, holistic, yeah, I mean, balance comes up, right? And it's like, especially something big with our temperaments, as far as I've heard, is like this idea of wanting to have balance and wanting
Mm.
to achieve balance. Whereas some people, that's not their primary goal. Or maybe it's not something they've become aware of or have noticed. So yeah, the first time was after college when I was applying for medical schools, and after that, it was probably when I started diving into somatic therapy. I would
Mm.
say that the the understanding of holistic became greater.
No, that's interesting. That's interesting because, like, I would say that somatic is more like an Eastern type of approach. Would you, or do you think that it's like
Yeah,
Western in nature?
yeah, I would say it's more Eastern.
So, like again, the word holistic is being like just tossed around everywhere,
Hmm.
especially in clinics in California, right? So I feel like people like start in the West, but then they end up in the East because like they don't find holistic stuff here, right?
Mm.
Like they find the name, but they don't find the meanings until they sort of move this way, you know.
Mm.
And then it's like, oh, somatics, oh, qigong, oh, you know, Islamic psychotherapy, oh, breath work, right? That's
Mm.
Indian, Chinese kind of world in a way, right? Greek, Unanitib, right?
Yeah. I think it also has to do with this inner versus outer approach, right? Holistic
Mm,
in the West might be still more things coming from the outside, right? Like herbal, holistic
yeah,
is still something coming from external world that you utilize for yourself, but
yeah,
holistic incorporates the inner world, and I think we shy away from the inner world too much. You can't,
mm,
you don't want to spend too much time. I mean, you don't want to spend your whole day there, right? You have to have this
mm,
outer world experience, but um, addressing and becoming comfortable with the inner world, I think, is a big part of the holistic equation that the East has certainly done a better job at prioritizing.
yeah, for sure,
Yeah.
for sure. So the name, Two Flags,
Two flags.
you came up
One,
with it.
two. Yeah,
I like it.
well, I'm. I feel like this is part of my journey is just being very literal right now. I'm still very
Yeah,
literal. I'm still in the very literal world,
yeah,
and it's yeah. So just yep, two flags. I feel like as we go through this, I might come up with other names that you know. Not gonna lie, I had like a name idea come up when we were talking.
yeah.
Um, but two
Go ahead.
flags is oh yeah, it was opening deeper.
Opening deeper. I like it.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see where it goes. But two
It's
flags,
very
yeah, because
holistic.
uh, two flags is who we are. I mean, yeah, and again, like the purpose of this podcast, I mean, for me is one to share and to be open and out there. Honestly, like it's weird that this is actually again for me, it's become like an insight of this is part of my journey, right? Is
Mm,
to start to talk about these topics in public and to other people, just because maybe the phlegmatic personality likes to just wait and wait and wait and
yeah,
wait and just hold on and not share. And
yeah,
holding on, I think again, it's that balance, right? Because holding on is good, but letting go is also good. And it depends on the
mm,
context and the situation. And I think again, right, in this holistic now therapy world we have in the mental health crisis in the West and in the world
yeah,
is let go, let go, let go. But what are we holding on to, right? And our personality and our identity is something that we need to, in some ways, hold on to.
mm,
But some aspects of that, which we namely name as the ego, which being something which is bad, which again is a whole nother topic, right? To get into the good and bad of the ego. There's some things to let go of, but
mm,
yeah,
mm.
two flags is not to divert too much, but yeah, who we are, simple,
No.
um, بسيطة, it's
بسيطة جدا.
yeah, so um, that's why I thought of the name.
Yeah. It resonates with me a lot because that's, I think, who I was for like a long time, especially,
Mm,
growing up in a college town, or a small town that happened to be a college town, right? It certainly wasn't as big as it is now, for sure. But uh, yeah, just being like, disconnected from like cities, trends,
mm.
shows, things like that, which is what I learned later in life that like, oh, people watch this show growing up, and it's like, oh, I didn't have that channel, but
Did you watch
it just
SpongeBob growing up, by the way?
I did watch SpongeBob. Yes,
Okay, I
SpongeBob.
didn't.
No way.
Exactly.
How did that happen? Do you not have the channel?
I don't know. I don't know how it happens.
Yeah,
I think because my parents like they threw all those shows into like one category of
yeah,
like the South Park
yeah,
category,
yeah.
like avoid.
Yeah.
Maybe that was the reason, but yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but please
I,
continue if you'd like.
I honestly don't think that you've missed much, to be quite frank with you. Like it's just like a thing, SpongeBob. Like you just had as
Mm,
part of the whole childhood starter package. It's like SpongeBob riding bikes until like 7 p.m. and like scrape knees. That's like the childhood starter package, right? Um,
I
but
would
yeah,
argue
man,
two of those are good.
two of those are good. Not SpongeBob.
I would just wonder, like TV programming,
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not going to say I don't watch TV shows, but it's it's just that get outside, right? Where we're
yeah.
in a digitized world now, and but
No,
anyways,
for real. No, no, no. I mean, that's a whole other thing to get into because the digitized world also makes the world fearful in a way. Because like
hmm,
growing up in the suburb, in the deep suburb, I'm talking like deep, deep suburb, where there were like cornfields and
hmm,
um, there was like one store near us, and it was I think maybe like a 30-minute walk. It was like a small little Brothers Pizza, I think, and it served slushies or something like that. I forget exactly what it was called, but yeah, um, living in that kind of environment, like it was easy for my parents to accept that, oh, Tarek is going biking with his friends until
Mm,
dinner time, which is 7. And I didn't have a phone, you know? And it was kind of like, I can do that and I can go and hang out with my friend and then I can come
mm,
back and like it'll be okay, right? But now,
mm,
like 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 if I did that now, like my parents would probably be calling me nonstop to be like, it's been like 4 hours and we haven't heard from you. So it's like, we need to hear from you just to reassure ourselves that everything's gonna be okay. And
mm,
I feel like that's how the world is now with a highly digitized, you know, plane.
mm.
But it's not as like, oh yeah, he's just going out, right? He's just biking with friends.
And God
It's
forbid something happens to you, and your parents get in trouble for you not having a phone. It's like it's your
yeah,
parents' fault that you don't have a
yeah,
phone and that you're out for 4 hours.
yeah,
For us, that was so normal.
right.
We're gonna
Very
go in the
normal.
woods. We're gonna go out on our bikes, and
Yeah,
we'll be back.
yeah.
Yeah.
Back by dinner time. Yeah,
What?
back by
What?
dinner time.
So you think because you mentioned the word fear there, like you think this? I saw an infographic of how much time is spent on what per day, and
Mm,
nowadays it's like think I think it was like 60% of our days are spent online, whatever that, entails, whether it's just being on the phone or this or on the computer or watching TV shows, but 60% of your waking time. I think it's either 40 or 60. Nonetheless,
yeah,
um, do you think that's increased the fear of the society that we live in now?
yeah. Being online increases the fear. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's got to be some kind of positive correlation between the two, right? Because like you're seeing things at like a global scale, you know? You're seeing the like monstrosities that other people can commit at a global scale. And instinctively, like when you see something like that, like you assume that it could also happen to you, right? Here at home, in your locale. Um, Actually, there's a really good book about this. It's called "Amusing Ourselves to Death," I think,
Mm,
um, where the author brings in this passage by I forget who it was, somebody who was against the invention and the spread of the telephone, right? Because from his perspective, he was saying like, what
mm,
why does somebody living in Texas need to know what's happening in New York, right?
mm,
Like it doesn't. It's almost like it doesn't concern them. Like this is weird, right? Like for them it was weird, right? You're living in Texas, so you should be concerned with what's happening in Texas. It's a very like local, targeted way of living, right? Which
mm,
is actually like a lot more effective because as soon as you start opening things up to like the global world, it's almost like you're I don't want to say distracted because it's good to know what's happening out there, but it's almost like you're divided, right? Like you can't put all of your effort into one thing. And so
mm,
like you're thinking about this and you're thinking about what's happening over here and overseas and like whether that person's okay and this person's okay. That's not to say that like it's bad to be concerned, you know what I mean? But like all of your efforts, all of your preoccupations are scattered. They're not
mm.
like locked in, you could say. And I
Fair
think
enough.
that causes a lot of fear because yeah, you're just exposed to too much. Too much that's not of your concern, too much that you don't have control over, too much that you can't do anything about, quite literally, right?
Mm,
And so I think that and just that alone, those few things alone, like increases the amount of maybe hopelessness
mm,
that people have, fear that people
mm,
have, right? Fear of like even going out, right? And like,
mm.
I mean, we both do a lot of travel, right? I'm sure you've heard this multiple times where it's like, isn't it dangerous over there? Where are you about to go to? And it's like, bro, what? Like here in Washington, D.C., there's like 4 stabbings a day, like by the White House.
Mm,
Like this is the
mm,
country that we live in. This is a dangerous place. But like if
mm,
I go to freaking Colombia, they're gonna ask me like, isn't it dangerous over there? Or
mm,
Jordan or Mexico or Egypt. Like, yeah, dude, it's dangerous everywhere. But
mm,
it's I don't know, something's like keeping you like locked in and safe. You know, like something forces you to kind of be small whenever you see so many calamities out in the world. You're like, oh, I don't want to go there, so I'll stay here where it's safe. But it's not safe here. It's not.
Mm. So it's really about the way that we receive as opposed to just the fact that it's there. Like kind of, it's almost like you're describing. It creates like this back burner anxiety for people
Backburn
that
anxiety. I like that. Yeah.
that is just it's on, it's there, and it's not being addressed because it's so easy to then switch back to my locale and those things. Like if we have a suspect on the loose, everybody's waiting for the cop to catch that suspect, and then
Yeah.
everybody's calm again. Whereas when you know there's a suspect in 5 different states or countries, you have no closure on those things. That might be really what we're looking at here is this idea of closure with our emotions. Yeah,
Mm.
the anxiety, the grief, the shame, the guilt, the worry, the tension, these different emotions don't have the ability to be processed and given closure to then
Yeah.
released and moved on from. And yeah, I mean, I think in my own journey is just seeing all those emotions come up
Yeah.
and processing them and realizing there's techniques to process them um, and then not getting stuck in the cycle and realizing at some point you have to kind of realize your own tendencies and your nervous system's behavior
Mm.
because yeah, I mean um, we have this opportunity to really see what is going on in the world. And at first, I was thinking maybe it's like a balance on how much we consume of world news, for
Yeah.
instance. But it's also about are we able to process that and have a have something to get us through that, without it taking us down and overwhelming us, that anxiety. If we don't, yeah, we're left with that anxiety, and
Yeah.
then that's where the problems come.
For sure. For sure. No, I think that's actually a really good point because like there's always going to be hardships out there, and there's always going to be like reasons to be afraid, right? But unless we have this kind of like way to interpret that fear and to interpret that calamity and that hardship and that difficulty, like there will always be open wounds, right?
Mm,
And so it, having closure, being able to interpret and understand and like, you know, lay to rest some of these like really terrifying visions and visuals that we see on the news and stuff like that. I think that's key, right?
mm,
And with you, it sounds like you're talking about like calming the nervous system, which is interesting, right? Like, well, what do you do whenever there's this, like you're bombarded with bad
mm.
news, basically, right? Like anytime you turn on the news, there's never any good stuff on there. You know, that's partly why I don't really watch it. Like
Yeah.
24/7 horror movie, like, dang, well,
Dang.
I'd rather read it, than
Mm,
watch it sometimes. But when
mm.
you say calming the nervous system, like what does that actually mean?
Yeah, so I mean, this is kind of like somatic therapy's approach, which is a bottom-up approach, which starts at the basic level of the body. And it's, if you've heard these terms or, books are written on like the body keeps the score,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
the body, at its like the one constant that we can all really tap into, other than the heart, which the heart is something to get to tap into, is the breath. And
hmm
as we influence our breath, we can influence our nervous system and our heartbeat and our nervous system and its kind of excitement level or its groundedness, and which then eventually influences the mind. But to
hmm
get to that calm mind, we have all this stuff tied up in the body that it's in some ways my belief that manifests into tumors and chronic health
hmm
conditions where we have these GI tract problems where, oh, like, we have some issue, and it's just like this tension that is
Yeah.
actually being held in the body that the mind hasn't processed. So as we influence the nerve, and the nervous system is carrying that electrical signal in, and sending that signal to say we're stressed here, and let's tighten up, our bowel or something, or
Yeah.
let's send these bad signals to the liver. And of course, other than what we ingest and what we consume in our fitness routine and sleep, and the holistic model, we have that emotional aspect of and that bottom up approach where the nervous
Mm.
system can come to rest and find safety. I think again, we're living in a time where we're not running from animals in the forest as we're out hunting.
Yeah.
We are being stressed out by our devices and by the news. And so we are running from those things, or our relationships, and those things stress us out and are causing us to have these chronic conditions because we haven't taken accountability and responsibility for our nervous system, and dealing with our what's stuck inside of us, because
Yeah.
there's stuff that's stuck inside of us that we need to allow to move and to give space to present itself and say,
Mm.
hey, like, we never processed that. And I think that's the strategy for a lot of us in the West as a former corporate employee, is just check
Yeah.
out from your emotions, do your job, and just go in this direction. Don't ask any questions. But the heart, the body, I think that essence of us, which is instilled in us to recognize and appreciate goodness,
Mm.
wants to understand, and it wants to ask questions, and it wants to incline towards truth. So if you allow yourself to wake up enough to that reality, and you say, hey, hold on, like, I need to understand this better, then you'll start to either work it out, or you realize you don't want to be in a situation like that. Like for me, I just realized at a certain point, like, I didn't want to be doing what I was doing. And my
Yeah.
nervous system was the one that I was being in contact with, in communication with, and saying, why am I feeling this way when I'm here and having this experience? And I think if we can just start to ask those questions, and then you have to process, and you have to, hard part about this, I think, which uh, I had a conversation with somebody about once, which was like, the rules change. When you get in
Hmm.
touch with your emotions, your routine that took you there
Hmm.
no longer serves you there. So you have to, like, change the way you're approaching your daily life. And that's like, wait, that's part of the identity, right? And you're like, wait, how do I
Mm.
navigate this? If now I came to this point by doing this, but now I need to act a different way. I need to take on new qualities to
Dang.
unwind that aspect. And
Yeah.
when I finally made that decision to quit my job, and now in the last 6 months, the amount of, I call it unwinding, but I think a good
Yeah.
way to understand it would be just deprogramming, that
Mm.
I had accepted certain type of programming to become a corporate employee.
Yeah.
And if I wanted to continue to rise the ranks of corporate world, I would have to continue to accept that programming.
Right.
And it just, at a certain point, it stopped making sense to me. It just stopped making sense, and as I need to understand this better, and as I understood it better, I realized it wasn't aligned with what I would say is like my heart,
Yeah.
and that all came from getting in touch with the breath and allowing the nervous system space to feel safe in itself without any external mechanisms
Wow.
influencing it.
No, that's rich, man. SubhanAllah. It's almost as though, like, in order to continue to operate through that programming that allows you to ascend the corporate ladder, like, fear is a necessary part of that. Like, you have to,
Mm,
like you have to do this in order to survive, right? And if you don't
mm,
do this, guess what? Somebody's going to be above you, and then somebody else
mm.
is going to be above you, and then you're just going to fall to the bottom, and you're going to be a loser, and nobody's going to love you. It's like it's like
Boom.
very like we're jumping quite a lot here, but a lot we all
Mm,
believe it. Like we all believe it
mm,
at first, and that's kind of what we're fed. But You
And
know,
it's very black
it's
and white. It's very black
very
and white
black
and
and white.
and all or nothing.
Yeah.
It's and those two realities didn't align with the reality of the heart for me.
Mm,
And that's where like I had to, okay, all or nothing is like I believe the only thing that's really like absolute and all or nothing is God.
yeah.
And so these things were being pushed on me as all or nothing, and I was just like,
Yeah.
it's not aligning.
It doesn't
Um,
sit right.
it wasn't sitting right. I say the true people that escape the matrix are
Mm,
the therapists
yeah.
because they didn't completely check out. They're actually
Mm,
helping the people that are in the battle, if you will, the
yeah.
battle of the daily grind, and they might be in their own wars and facing their own shadows, but um, they've made a conservative effort to make that their livelihood as opposed to anything else. And um, yeah, yeah.
It's interesting that you say that because I think that therapists definitely do have like a way out of this whole corporate rat race game, a fear, scarcity model. Like, hurry up, you gotta grind, otherwise you're not gonna be able to pay your bills and you're gonna lose everything and lose everyone.
Mm,
I think they do have like an outlet to that that's available to them. But I mean, insofar as like what I've spoken about with my supervisors, like a lot of them are right where everybody else is, you know, because
mm,
it's wow, there's like a lot going through my mind right now, but it's easy to think that you're better than somebody else when you're a therapist
mm,
because I think every therapist to some extent has the ability to like see a little bit more than the average person, right? Um, and that vision is like light, right? That can sort of guide you out of this tunnel that everybody's in. But sometimes people focus so much on the light that they have that they forget the path that they're walking to some degree, and then they
mm,
end up falling back right where everybody else is, right?
mm,
And it's like, oh, well, I'm better than so and so, or I can see a little bit, so I must be in a good place
mm,
while others aren't, right? And it almost like closes that dimension of the inner self that's so necessary to confront
mm,
over and over again to keep going. Because that's something that came up while you were talking, actually, is that like, you know, when you were saying the nervous system and all that, like, it requires this constant confrontation of the inner world. Like, you're going deeper and you're finding out, like, what is going on here, right? What am I feeling here? Like, why am I responding this way to the situation, right?
mm,
Is there something that happened to me back in the day that's causing me to respond like this? It's not, like you're confronting and you're treading constantly
mm,
inwardly, right? And then the second thing that came up for me that you were talking about was this kind of like dynamism, like this ability to change based on the
mm,
circumstance, right? That you're not just like one way, like very rigid, right? And I think, not to go off on another tangent, but I think that's two things that actually Western medicine really lacks. Because it's like, you know, you have you have pills, for example, right, that allow a person to continue to be living the life that they always have lived without changing anything.
mm,
Right? The only thing that you change is that you take this pill, but you can kind of remain the same, right? And we don't have to go into the inner world, and we don't have
mm,
to go into the whole holistic thing, right? You just continue what you're doing, but just take this pill and
mm.
just pay me through your insurance or something like that, right?
That's a key.
Yeah, that's the key. And then you're good. You don't have to change at all. And it's like, oh, great. That's
Mm,
very convenient. It's very easy. It's very comfortable. I don't have to change. I can remain who I am, right? But then you get into this weird, like, there's intrapsychic fissure that happens there, which
mm,
basically just means that there's like conflict that's happening in the self. It's like, I don't like this, but it's comfortable, right? Like, I want to stay
mm,
here, but like something isn't right, and I just want to like something isn't right, right? I think that's partly like the fitra in some ways.
Mm,
It's responding to this unnatural way of being, like very
mm,
rigid, very unchanging. Because like as our nature, like changes in our nature, you know. And if we're not changing, then we're not tapped into that natural version of ourselves. So and that means change on like a physical level, maybe on a cognitive level, but also an emotional level and a somatic level, like what you were talking about.
mm,
Like change in all aspects of these things. But you know, even just saying that, like it's daunting just hearing that. It's like, oh shoot,
mm.
like I'll have to change all that. Like,
Yeah,
no.
yeah. No, sorry. So that's 100% because that's it's like it's just you just have to just one time try, just one time
Yeah,
try. You know, just like one time try to honor that tapped in version.
yeah,
And for the people that are, sensitive or experiencing the anxieties from the world news, for instance, it's a good thing actually. It means you're
yeah,
tapped in,
yeah,
because there's obviously people that are just untapped to that and they're able to be a part of or see or allow for that on a daily basis, weekly basis.
mm,
And we're over here, crying for help of understanding. But that, I mean, again, and then for those that are witnessing that, it's just it's good that they're tapped into that. And again, I think it's just one, accepting and processing, and then in another way is you're mentioning um, uh, you're mentioning at the end there being tapped in, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So just being tapped in, and yeah, it's I guess this is probably a big topic for people is
yeah,
processing grief and witnessing grief, experiencing grief, and just going back to what you're saying is like maybe it's just better to stay local, stay
mm,
local. But it's just the world we're living in now, and I think we have to work harder. It's almost the same way our parents ate food. Now
mm,
we read labels because some of what we're eating is not really real food.
yeah,
So we have to pay attention to that. And now we also, because we're tapped into the global grief, we have to work to process that grief. And um, and that could be very new for people. That can be very new, and it's required. It's no longer. This is the one thing I was going to say earlier is that again, to be successful, some people will say, put your emotions aside and just
mm,
live in tunnel vision. And
mm,
that might work for some people, but again, for the approach that we're taking with this holistic nature, which is I can move forward with my whole self, my whole heart being present because I want to be a person of presence, as
mm,
opposed to if I put that on the side and I go tunnel vision, I might end up at the destination, but I'll have left my whole self behind.
yeah, yeah,
That's what I want to cultivate, and I think we should be working to cultivate. And the youth, I think, are exposed to it now. Their awareness is higher now at their age than when we were that age, and maybe a broad scale. And bringing that to light and to the surface, as you said, it's about being a light worker, but
mm,
also recognizing you have to continue to polish your own self along the way, and not um, allow the fact that you do that to be viewed as anything more than just a gift that
mm,
was a gift from God in
yeah.
some ways. So um, yeah. Any last thoughts? Any last
Inshallah, man.
thoughts?
Yeah, that was rich, man. Honestly, something that's coming to mind for me is like the Asian obsession with bamboo. No, just hear
Asian
me out.
obsession with bamboo.
Like it does connect, right? Back to what we were saying. But I, the bamboo plant has always been like a symbol for a lot of a lot of virtue in the Chinese tradition, and I'm sure in different parts of Asia. But it's prized for its ability to stay rooted and to also move with the times and the wind, right? So I feel like as we're talking here, like it's important to kind of like, and I guess this is one thing that I'm taking away from this is that, it's important to like root myself somewhere and also to be adaptive to change, right? Because that's kind of something that leads to strength eventually, you know. And I think the bamboo plant, if I'm not mistaken, is one of like the strongest forms of plants or trees or whatever that's classified out there amongst the others because of its ability to not be so rigid such that it can like move and navigate, right? It can change, but it's also rooted, right? So yeah, be like bamboo. That's what's coming to mind for
Beautiful.
me.
I love that. Yeah, I appreciate that. We don't see bamboo too much in the Northeast, but
No,
whenever
we
I see
don't.
the trees, I'm always thinking, even the trees are on their heavenly ascent.
Yeah,
And beautiful.
yeah.
Well, let's wrap it up there, and thank you all for listening. Thank you, bro. I mean, this is gonna be both of us for everybody watching and listening, and we hope to bring you guys more cool topics, interesting topics, thought-provoking topics, and if you have any that you'd like to hear us talk about from our perspective, please drop a comment, like, subscribe, and share.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, bro.
Peace.